Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Nancy Stark, and with me here today is Deanna Booker. Deanna is our resident financial guru, and she's also the manager of community outreach and communications at Consumer Credit Counseling Service of Maryland and Delaware.
That's a mouthful.
It really is. Could you tell us a little bit about what CCCS does, Deanna?
Sure. We are a nonprofit organization. We're providing all sorts of financial education and counseling. We're doing budget counseling and housing counseling and credit counseling. We've been serving folks here on the Eastern Shore since 1966.
Ah, that's a while.
Yeah, just providing any kind of help that we can just to get folks financially empowered and help to make them financially stable and secure.
That's a wonderful goal.
Yeah.
Well, as I look out and think about things, the grass is getting a little greener, the sky seems a little bluer,
Yes.
and it's that time of year where people are starting to actually look more to buy a home. And that's
Yes.
particularly
Yes.
true for first-time buyers.
Mm-hmm.
What advice can you give to those first-time buyers, Deanna?
Wow. It's just, it's so
Start you right
much.
off with a
Yeah,
hard one.
it's so much. Buying a home is, it's huge. It's huge. It's one of the most complicated and involved things, folks will ever do. It's the biggest purchase, that most of us will ever make. And it really is complex. So the advice that I would give first-time home buyers is just before you make that leap, before you get out there and start trying to buy a home, that you learn as much as you can around the process before you get into the middle of it, because it really is complex and it really can be complicated. It's full of a lot of decisions, and those decisions that you make can impact you for years and years to come, when it comes to buying a house. So I'd say just learn as much as you can.
That's really good advice.
Yeah.
And it's true. It is, to me, when I think about home buying, when I bought homes before, it's one of the most exciting times in your life.
It is.
But it's
very
also
exciting.
one of the most complicated as far as all those things that you have to think about.
Exactly.
With that said, what kind of resources are out there for first-time buyers, people who are just coming into the process for the first time?
Right. There are all kinds of resources. There are HUD-approved counseling agencies like Consumer Credit Counseling of Maryland and Delaware that are offering low cost or even free sometimes pre-purchase home buyers education. So you can go to a workshop that's a classroom setting. You can have a personalized, individualized counseling session, one-on-one with a counselor around what's called pre-purchase home buyers education. So it's out there, and you want to make sure that you get it. You really do.
That sounds like a good resource.
Right.
Why is it important for it to be HUD approved?
Well, that's a great question. If you get HUD approved, or if you get counseling from a HUD approved housing counseling agency, you can be assured that you're getting the most reliable, knowledgeable, smart, advice that's out there. HUD monitors the agencies that they approve, and they don't approve everybody. So, if you're working with a HUD approved agency, you're certain that you're getting the best advice. HUD approved agencies have counselors who are trained and certified. They have to go through rigorous training and testing. They have to maintain that certification. So again, if you're working with an agency that's HUD approved, you can be assured that you are getting the best possible help and advice that there is.
So if I come to CCCS for pre-purchase counseling or education, what are some of the things I would probably learn?
Wow, you're going to learn so much. It's a really big course. It's a really big course. It's really involved. It's really detailed. But some of the things that come to mind, you're going to learn how to identify any barriers that there may be to you buying a home. You're going to learn about your budget and how to set it up and how to maintain it and what it needs to look like and how it needs to be structured. You're going to learn about how to get your credit report and review it and understand it and, correct things that are on it that are inaccurate. You're going to learn about, programs that are out there for down payment assistance.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Right, and you're going to be able to get referrals and that kind of thing for that kind of help. So it's wide. There's so much information in the pre-purchase course that potential buyers are going to take away.
It's kind of like getting your hand held through the process.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Thing. Well, I can think, I go back and I think about the very first home that we bought. And one of the things I remember is there were times that it just felt like I was in a blizzard. The amount of information that there was, the amount of things that we had to think about.
Yes.
It's hard to even know where to start. What advice could you give on that? Where do you start?
Well, I think, it's not enough to know what neighborhood you want to live in.
Right.
It's not enough to know how many square feet you want. I think the very first place that folks have to start is assessing what their financial situation is at the point they decide they want to buy a home. So because your credit rating, your credit history, it's going to have a huge impact. So you've got to recognize where you stand, from a financial perspective before, so before you go measuring closets, you
better know where you stand financially.
Exactly. You've got to have your finances in order. I think that's the first place. That's the best place to start.
How do you go about making that financial assessment?
Well, it's gonna take a little bit of work, but it's not impossible. I think what you have to do, like we talk about every time that I'm here, you really have to look at where you are. So you've got to calculate, you got to do some math. You've got to calculate what your income is. What do we have to work with? You've got to list and total up all of your monthly expenses, and it has to be everything. What you're spending for food and utilities and everything.
Those things are not going to go away after you have a house.
Exactly. And because you want to be factoring in, how are we going to manage all of these things and still cover, our savings, still have money to put towards the expenses that are going to come, things that are going to come up when we buy the house. So you've got to do that math. You have to subtract your expenses from your income, see where you are, see what kind of adjustments have to be made. You've got to do that first. That has to be the first step.
Well, that makes sense as far as in making the assessment. It's like looking at your budget.
Exactly.
How important is it to actually develop more savings?
I think it's really important because they're going to be unexpected, unanticipated expenses, when it comes to buying the house. Talk about, the one of the major things, obviously the down payment. Down payment on a house can be 20%. How are we saving up for that? Are we saving up for that? Are we going to be able to manage? And then there are other things. There are other expenses that maybe we don't anticipate when we're thinking about buying the house. So there are closing costs and moving expenses and all.
It's amazing how many costs there are.
Absolutely. Title insurance and all this kind of thing. So it's important that we're growing our savings and we're making certain that we're building that foundation up. So we're going to be able to manage all of these things as they come along.
That makes full sense. Well, when it comes to looking at mortgage financing, how can you prepare?
Well, I think that the first thing that you have to do is make sure that you're maintaining stable employment. That's really, really key. Lenders, when they're looking at you, they want to see that stability, and they want to see it in your employment history. Most lenders want to see that you've been at the same job or in the same field for at least 2 years, that you've got some time in, that you're stable, so that means something.
It's not the time to take a new job.
Yeah, it's not the time to change jobs. It's not the time to do a lot of bouncing around. So that's really important as you prepare, to go to get financing. And then the other thing is just what we were talking about, accumulating as much savings as possible, making sure that
How is that going to affect you?
It's going to affect because the more savings that you have or the more money that you have to be able to put toward, we were talking about the down payment and all these expenses, it's going to make you more attractive. It's going to make you more attractive as a buyer to a lender or to a seller. So you really want to accumulate as much as you can.
Does it also make sense for you to pull your credit report or credit score and take a look at those ahead of time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great point. And you really want to do it far enough ahead of time. I would say you want to do it weeks, a month maybe, a month and a half before you even start the application process, because you want to see what's on that credit report. You want to see who's saying what, see how things are being reported. And if there's something there that's inaccurate, having that time kind of on the front end, that's going to give you time to get those things corrected and go through a dispute process and that sort of thing. So absolutely, pulling the credit report is key. And you can go to www.annualcreditreport.com. I know I give that website every time I'm here.
For the three major credit reporting
Exactly, the
agencies.
three major credit reporting agencies. We're all entitled to a free copy of our credit report every year from all three of the agencies. So you want to get it. And the perfect time is weeks before you start applying so you can make sure that everything's right.
That's good. So we've talked about how to prepare for home ownership. What types of mortgage financing is out there for people who have a limited income?
Well, I think the main two, like most of us probably know, they're FHA loans. There's FHA and there's VA. FHA loans are insured, obviously, by the Federal Housing Administration, hence FHA.
Right.
They're insured against you defaulting. on the loan. Now, there are some qualifications. You've got to have, a pretty decent credit rating. There are income limitations and that kind of thing. So you want to do some research. You want to find out, what kind of product is going to be best for you. VA loans, obviously, are insured by the Veterans Administration. Right. Now, there aren't any income requirements there. I do know that.
Other than you have to be a veteran.
You have
That's
to be
not
a veteran, obviously.
Right? You do have to have that
obviously.
as a qualification.
But again, there are all kinds of programs and things that are available. So I always say to folks, check with your county clerk's office, check with your local, housing office, and find out what kind of programs are available, the things that you might qualify for.
Oh, that's a very, very good point. And that's encouraging for people who are first-time buyers, particularly.
Exactly, because it doesn't put home buying out of reach. It makes it so that there are ways for folks to be able to qualify.
Good. What else do borrowers need to know about applying for a mortgage?
Well, I think they just need to know how mortgages work.
That's an important one.
I think that's the main thing. There's so much information around how mortgages work and what they mean and the terms and the terminology. So you want to know, going in, the difference between a fixed rate mortgage and an adjustable rate mortgage. Right. You want to know that a fixed rate mortgage, that rate's going to be fixed and it's not going to change over the life of the loan. The payment and how much you're paying towards principal and that kind of thing might adjust, but it's going to be a fixed rate. You want to know that an ARM is just that. It is an adjustable rate mortgage. That interest rate.
And that's very different from a fixed rate.
Exactly. That interest rate is going to change. So while ARMs a lot of the times they allow folks to be able to qualify for more mortgage and buy more house, more expensive house.
A smaller payment.
A smaller payment, right, because that's what they're looking for. They get a larger house with a smaller payment, maybe not understanding that when that rate adjusts and that payment goes much higher. Yes, much higher. And, if we don't have the income, if our income isn't growing accordingly to be able to manage that payment, then we're going to be into some trouble. So I think it's just about knowing. It's about understanding how mortgages work and what things mean.
Well, that's a good point. If you're a first-time buyer, how can you tell that you're going to get the best loan?
Wow.
That's a hard one, right? Yeah.
I think what you have to do is shop around.
Okay,
I really think you have to shop it around because you don't want to go with just the first person who says, yeah, I can do everything in the world. You want to shop around. Contact a few lenders. Get them to send you a GFE. What a GFE is, it's a good faith statement, or a good faith estimate, on a HUD form. It's a listing of all of the costs, all of the things that are going to be associated with that loan. So, closing costs and title and everything that's going to be involved with that loan. You want to get a few lenders to send you some GFEs and you want to review them. Look them over. Compare, exactly. See how they look, see what they mean. Now, here's the thing. If you contact a lender and they don't want to or they refuse to send you a GFE, go somewhere else.
Yeah, that's not a good sign.
Yeah, it's not a good sign. You don't even want to get involved. You don't want to go down that road of a lender who isn't willing to do that sort of thing, or who wants you to sign blank forms, or who wants you to make false statements.
These are all signs of someone who might not be reputable.
Exactly. So I think that's a good place to start. That's a good first step in making sure that you get the best deal.
That's good advice. Yeah. It's funny, when I think about, I'm going back to when I was a first-time buyer.
Okay.
It's funny, another thing that I realized at that point, and even now, to me, it seems like there's a lot of jargon that's involved in buying a home. I mean, there are all kinds of, like, GFE.
Yeah, right. I know, I just said it like that.
That's right. And that's one thing I think that first-time buyers need to do, is they need to get comfortable with that kind of terminology.
Absolutely.
One of the ones that always mystified me was the term point. What exactly are points?
Yeah, points. We hear that a lot. A point is the amount of money that you're going to pay as what's called a loan origination fee. 1 point is equal to 1% of the loan amount. So here's a way to understand it. If you're paying 1 point on a $100,000, I'm using round numbers because it's easy math. If you're paying 1 point on a $100,000 loan, that's a $1,000 fee. That's a loan origination fee that you're going to pay. So what you don't want is a loan that saddles you with a whole lot of points, because that's just a whole lot of extra thousands of dollars that you're paying out. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But you're right about buyers understanding the terms and the lingo and knowing, what all these acronyms and everything mean. You're less likely to be to make mistakes or to be taken advantage of.
Both.
You know, exactly.
Makes
If you
sense.
have a better understanding.
Well, when it comes time to actually apply for a mortgage, what do buyers need to know?
Well, you need to know a lot. But one of the things that I've been thinking of since we're sitting here is not, and this will sound strange, but what you don't want to do is be less than truthful. So in plain English, what I'm saying is don't lie.
You're right. Even though it's tempting because you found that dream house.
Right, you found that house and
you tell a little more about, I have bigger income.
Yes, yeah, and I have less debt and I've been at my job a little long. Yeah. You don't want to make any false statements. Don't lie about your income, about your expenses, about whether or not you plan to live in the house. Don't lie about your employment. Nothing. Don't make any false statements when it comes to your mortgage application. Number one, because if you do, you're committing mortgage fraud.
Wow, you could go to jail.
Right, mortgage fraud is a crime, and it has criminal penalties. And you're just setting yourself up for a lot of issues down the road. So I would say that would be another thing that I would point out. Be be explicitly truthful when it comes to your mortgage application.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I've often heard that it helps to be pre-approved for a mortgage. What exactly does that mean?
It does. It does help to be pre-approved. And it can mean a lot because a lot of times folks do things maybe in a little bit of a reverse order. So they go out and they find a house and they fall in love with it and they really want to have it and it's the one for them. Then they go to the lender and find out that they don't qualify.
Right.
You know, for the amount of whatever that house is going to cost. And so you can get into a lot of heartache and headache.
Finding out that you know,
finding
once
out
you
that you really can't have it.
Invest a lot of emotion.
Exactly,
and all of a sudden,
exactly. So it pays to get pre-approved just to save yourself that heartache. You're going to know going in exactly how much you can afford.
So that's what it is the lender is telling you that.
Exactly.
What is the difference between being pre-approved and pre-qualified?
Right. And a lot of times folks use those terms interchangeably and they're not the same thing. I'm so glad you brought that up. Being pre-qualified or pre-qualification doesn't come with any commitments. There are no promises made.
It's kind of like an estimate,
Exactly.
a ballpark.
Exactly. The lender's just giving you an estimate of what you might, be able to qualify for. There's nothing in stone. Pre-approval is the lender guaranteeing you that financing. The lender has said, yes, you qualify, this is what we're going to lend you. We are entering into this agreement with you. And barring any, major issues, you're going to get that financing. So if you've got pre-approval, stepping out that you have the financing and exactly how much it's worth.
That saves you the heartache.
Exactly.
But it also probably makes you more attractive to the seller.
Absolutely.
As well, I would think.
If you come, to the seller with that pre-approval, you're much more attractive. You're much less risky, to a seller. Absolutely.
Well, so you found your dream house. About how much can you expect that you're going to put down as a down payment?
Down payments are big. Down payments are usually 20%.
That's quite a bit of money.
Yeah, and that's a lot of money. So it goes back to savings, how we were talking about preparing for that. 20% is a lot of money. Now, sometimes you can get away with, there are programs and different things you can get away with paying less of a down payment. But still, even sometimes as low as 5%. It's still a chunk of money, and the thing about that is the less you put down, the higher generally your interest rate is going to be.
Right.
So there's that trade-off. The other thing, not just down payments, even though they're huge, you're talking about closing costs.
Right.
They can be somewhere a lot of the times between 2 and 5, 6, 7% of the loan amount. It's a lot of money. So when you start adding these things up, it's a lot. So down payments and closing are a big part of it. And again, it's why folks have to be prepared.
Not only that, but once you get in the house, there's going to be other expenses.
Absolutely.
How can buyers locate a home that's the right one for them?
Well, I think you just have to, you gotta give it some thought. Once you get through pre-approval and all the business, of mortgage financing. Right, now it's the fun time. So now it's time to, think about what neighborhood you want to be in and sit down and give some thought to, what kind of house do we want? This is the time to, talk to your family. All of you are going to be sharing this space for a while. So, how many bathrooms do we need? How many bedrooms do we need? Do we want a garage? Do we want a big backyard? You got to think about where location.
Location is very important.
Right. Do we need to be, near the schools? Is it close to work? Are we near the malls or the libraries? That kind of thing. So I think you want to spend time differentiating obviously between what you want and what you need when it comes to a house. But like you said, I think that's the fun time, preparing all of that and figuring out, exactly how you want your home to look and what you want it to mean to you.
That makes sense. And if you're going to be in it for a while, I think it also pays to think about how you will be using it as time goes on.
Absolutely.
And your needs change.
Absolutely. So as your family, maybe right now your family's large, all the kids are there, but maybe as children leave, or is this going to be possible or feasible for us to still live in this house when we're older, that kind of thing. So you're right, all of that has to be considered.
That's exactly right. Now, I've always heard that for first-time buyers it pays to have a reputable real estate agent. They can they're like getting counseling. It's another part of that, having your hand held in a way.
Absolutely.
How can you find a reputable real estate agent?
Well, I think one of the best ways is talk to your family, your friends. Maybe they can recommend.
That's true.
Exactly. Maybe they can recommend realtors that they've used, that they were, happy with, that were successful for them. You want to check around though, just like with GFEs, and you're talking to 3 lenders. You want to talk to 2 or 3 or 4, realtors and have little interviews with them. Find out, what are they, buyer's agents or seller's agents? How long have they been a licensed agent? Do they offer any guarantees? What kind of homes do they usually show? You can look around at the houses that are for sale in your area and see what realtors are, listing those homes or representing those sellers, and you could start there. But you definitely want to talk to a few of them before you make a decision.
Now, it's funny, we interviewed agents when we were going through, and occasionally what we would come up on is somebody that said that they represent both sellers and buyers. No. Is that a good idea?
I disagree. I disagree. I don't think it's a good idea.
Okay.
I don't think it is, and this is why. Because I don't think that one agent can fairly and equally, those are the 2 main components, fairly and equally represent the buyer and the seller. I just don't think that can be. So I feel like you should have, every home buyer should have an agent that answers to them. Strictly to them. They should be your agent. So, I disagree.
Yeah, that makes me feel better because we decided not to do that. What other steps do you need to take before you buy a home? You
have to have an appraisal report. You've got to request a certified appraisal report, because what you're trying to determine is the actual and accurate market value of that property. So you can go to the county clerk's office, that kind of thing, even the libraries. Most libraries have some resources about where you can get that information. But you want to request that appraisal report because, again, you want to know. You have to have that information. You have to be armed with it.
You want to know what it's worth.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. You have to know that going in. Another thing that you want to do is get a certified home inspection done on the house, because you want to make sure that there aren't huge, structural problems. You want to make sure that the roof doesn't leak, and the plumbing isn't bad and the wiring isn't bad, and that kind of thing. Now, these reports, these things that I'm talking about, they're not free. They cost something. But they're worth it, I would think. Because they tell you if there's something serious that's wrong. You want to know it ahead of time. Exactly. That's exactly where I was going. They're not free, but they're worth it because, again, down the road, if you find out that the plumbing is bad or the wiring is bad, later on, the cost of repairing those kinds of issues is going to be much, much larger than it would have been to pay a few $100s to get these reports done. So I think those are important steps to take. That's a good point. And I guess we have closing. Closing, what I remember about closing is about 16 dead trees because there were so many pieces of paper 50 reams of paper and no time to read them. And it's kind of a scary process. Exactly. That might be another episode of Money Talk. Closing might be. But closing is huge. And again, it goes back to the knowledge and the information and making sure that you're learning enough about the process before you get in it. The sitting at settlement, sitting at that closing table isn't the time for you to, first first time you learn learning about some of the things that are going on. So you're exactly right. All of that kind of thing plays in to getting the education that you need around the process before you start the process. That fully makes sense. And I think even though it's reams of paper, it pays to read what's there. Absolutely. Take the time, even though it takes some time, to actually ask questions if you're not sure of things, all of that. You're absolutely right. But coming back to that whole question as far as getting help,
we're getting close to the end, I think, of what we're doing here today.
Oh
and I would
my,
like you to tell us a little more about CCCS's pre-purchase counseling and education program. How does it work?
Certainly. We're offering that education program. We're doing pre-purchase workshops. Folks can call our housing line. It's 1-866-731-8486 and schedule to come to that workshop. You're going to learn so much. There's so much information. It does come at a cost. The workshop is $125 for an individual, $150 for a couple to take the class, but it's huge. It's huge, and it's something that's worth it to to have that information and get that education around the process before you start. Also, folks can visit our website, www.cccs-inc.org. In the resources section, there's so much education. We have e-learning courses, podcasts, all kinds of things about housing and home buying. So there's definitely there's definitely a lot of great information on the site.
That sounds absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, before we leave, do you have any parting thoughts for our first-time home buyers?
Oh, parting advice. Buying your first house, it's exciting and it's wonderful, and for a lot of us,
the American dream.
Yeah, the American dream, exactly.
That's
it
right.
represents that. But it is a complex and complicated process. So I think my parting advice would be what I've said a few times. Understand, get some knowledge around the process before you get into it. Learn all that you can. Ask all the questions that you feel you need to. Get all of the information going in so your process turns out positively, and so you have a good experience, around buying your first home, because it should be. It should be. So I think that's my parting advice. Just learn all you can.
Well, folks, I have one piece of parting advice myself, and that is be aware that that's just the beginning of what you will be paying.
Absolutely.
Because once you own it, you own it.
You own it, absolutely. It's called closing. We were talking about closing, but it really is the beginning.
The start. That's
right.
That's right. And on that, Dee, thank you so much for being here.
It's
You
my
always
pleasure.
have so much good information.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we want to thank PAC 14 for giving us this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you, PAC 14.
And for all of those of you who are out there and who have listened and been part of our audience today, we really appreciate it. And we wish you happy house hunting if you're in that market. And hope you join us again next time.
Would you like to see your community organization or nonprofit group featured on PAC 14? To get started, contact us at 410-677-5014 or visit our website at www.pac14.org. PAC 14 is a great way to connect with your community.